So today we'll be doing chapter 4, and chapter 4 is also on Karma Yoga. Chapter 3 covered the sort of introductory Karma Yoga. So you can think of it as the most basic form, the starting form. This one is called the Yoga of Renunciation of Action and Knowledge. So a lot of this in chapter 4 is going to deal with how to do Karma Yoga in a spirit of dedication and devotion. And that is how the yajna that is covered here, that is the yajna is in a broader sense of how Karma Yoga can be done as a yajna. And we covered that in chapter 3 also a little bit, because I wanted you to get some understanding of what this yajna is and how is it related to Karma Yoga and actions and so forth. And how does this relate to us now in this world, in the 21st century, living in the Silicon Valley? How can we perform Karma Yoga, which seems so difficult to do, where everything is tied to results, everything is tied to ambition, and success is measured and so forth. And how can we do this? So it's very much like how you would tell a child, do your 100%, but do not be so tied to the results. So even if you come second in class or you get a B, you don't get an A, but you did your 100%, that's the max you can do. So that is it. It's in its basic, but also in terms of Karma Yoga being like a yajna, where you do it in a spirit of dedication and devotion, is an attitude where you do things from your innermost self. If you do things from your ego self, the efficiency of your actions is not going to be so good, because the ego is limited, and when we come from our ego and our limited intellect, the result will also be limited. So when you do it from a much deeper self, from a much deeper aspect of yours, there will be more fulfillment in life. There will be less regrets in life, because you know that you've done the best you can. But when you work from your deeper aspect, the actions themselves are more purer and more perfect. How should I put this? So basically it's so I would say intuition is higher than intellect. Yourself is higher than your mind and intellect. So it will guide you in what to do. It will not have attachments to this world. Because see, the ego is always bothered about me and I and mine. So when you do it only for yourself and only for the ego to serve the ego, then there are always disappointments. There are always, whatever you gain is temporary. But when you do it from your higher self, from your soul level, then the attachments are not there. So, if you gain millions of dollars, you won't rise in arrogance. You will not rise in your ego. You will not be so attached to those millions of dollars. And if you lose it also, you will not be disappointed. You will not be grieved and depressed and all, because you would have achieved a sense of detachment. And I know people like this who are actually very rich, and they are not attached to their material wealth. So they have worked very hard and they have earned a lot of money. They're not arrogant about it. They don't have a big ego about it, about their position, power, money, and so forth. And I know, actually personally, I know people who have lost a lot of wealth from being, one of the richest Indians in America, for example, a lady that I know, to something that happened where they, lost their wealth. And I know others also, actually, even in India, I know somebody. But it doesn't destroy them. It doesn't. They have a deeper sense of identity as their soul, and they know that it'll come and it'll go. So to avoid miseries and sufferings is why this path is being given to us, to achieve the best we can in life, and not to suffer and not to have consequences because of it. So I hope that makes sense. So in chapter 4, he continues. Sri Krishna continues to give this teaching. So one of the important things that this chapter transitions to is from Karma Yoga as a very obvious action path, the path of action. It transitions to Gyan Yoga, where Krishnji then says that knowledge is the highest path, and so he shifts the emphasis from the physical action to the aspect of knowledge in our lives and in our path. And knowledge is obviously gained from a guru, from a teacher. So he talks about, there's a verse in there where he says about, at the end of the chapter, it describes what are the qualities of a student and what are the qualifications of a teacher. Now this comes from the Vedas. So the Vedas have the qualifications of a student are listed as the sadhana chatushtaya, which I've mentioned to you before. So this is Vivek, Vairagya, Shat Sampati, the 6 spiritual wells, and Mumukshutvam, the desire for liberation. So you can look it up, I can send you a link, but this is very important, and it'll come up throughout the Gita. We have been talking about Vivek, which is discrimination between the permanent and impermanent, which leads to Vairagya, which is dispassion or detachment, however you want to put it, but which is Vairagya. The 6 sampatis, which include control of the senses, control of the mind, and Shraddha, which is mentioned here in this chapter, is a qualification of a student to have Shraddha. Shraddha, what Shraddha means in Vedic terms, is to have faith in the teacher and faith in the scriptures that you are learning. Because unless you have faith, you cannot learn. Unless you have faith in your teacher and faith in the scriptures, you will not learn. This is different from learning science. If you're doing spiritual learning, which cannot really sometimes be proven, science can be proven, but for things which cannot be proven empirically, then you have to have faith. So that is and the mumukshutvam, which is desire for liberation. That's the qualifications of the student. The qualifications of the teacher is one who is adept in the scriptures, who knows the scriptures very well, and also one who has become that knowledge, the existential experience. So the teacher lives what he preaches. So he practices what he preaches. He has become that knowledge. He's a living example. Because the only way we truly learn is not really from words. If you look at how you learn and how your children learn, are from how people are, what they are rather than what they say. So that is mentioned also in this chapter. And
I have one question.
yeah.
The first one, chapter 3, was Karma Yoga,
Mm-hmm.
which is Karma Adhikaraste Ma Phalesu Kadachana.
Right.
Now, chapter 4, it's talking about renunciation of the action. Doesn't renunciation of action means do not do the action?
No, it actually means do it from an attitude of renunciation.
A
So
little bit. What do you mean attitude of renunciation? Meaning no ego? That's one example you gave.
correct. So renunciation means you know not to hold on to not to not to do it from the ego, right? That is one thing. So when you do actions, like for example, if you do volunteer work, if you do seva, it is from an attitude of selflessness. It's unconditional. It's not tied to your ego, right? You're doing it for somebody else. You're not doing it for yourself, and you don't expect anything in return. So when you do it from a sense of renunciation, it is from that detachment that you do it. Detachment is always means not from the ego. You're not attached to anything outside. It's attachment is always connected with the ego.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it will when you read the chapter, it'll become
I
very.
did read chapter, I didn't say earlier, but it was a little bit going.
Yeah, yoga of renunciation, of action in knowledge. So the main aspect is the in knowledge part of it. So when you do action from a place of wisdom, is what this really means. So renunciation of action in knowledge.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So basically, acting from wisdom. So that's why this chapter transitions to knowledge a lot, and you'll see it in the chapter how he transitions. So this karma yoga is important. Again, it says here, because unless and until you integrate the mind and intellect, uh, it cannot absorb knowledge. So that is why karma yoga is very important, is to first make the mind and intellect ready for knowledge. And through karma yoga, what happens is your mind and intellect uh, become more integrated, because you're not so driven by desires. Your mind is not running wild, like wild horses running uh, on the field in the world. So when they are more restrained and they are more under control through the intellect and wisdom, then your mind can be ready for knowledge. Okay? So, okay, so I'll just go quickly over some verses. I'll emphasize some verses. I have only 45 minutes, so I'm going to stop at certain pertinent verses. So the first verse is where Krishnji says, I taught this imperishable yoga to the sun, and then to Manu, and then to Ishvaku. And one other thing I should mention here. So till now, you see, Krishnji has been talking to Arjun as a friend, right? Friend and relative. Now you will see that Krishnji will transition. He'll start speaking from his supreme self, from his higher self, from his ultimate personality, so to say. Not as Krishna, the friend or the relative of Arjun. So what I want you to do is, when you hear Krishnji's words saying, I am so and so, from a higher perspective, I want you to think of that coming from your own consciousness. This is very important. Don't think of it as though it is Krishnji saying it, but it's the Krishna consciousness in you speaking. Then you will see how differently you will interpret these verses. It's very nice. It's very profound. It has a huge impact when you see it from that perspective. So when we cover that verse, I'll just tell you when we get to it. Let's see where we are. Okay, so Krishnji starts the thing saying, I first taught this yoga to the sun, to Manu and Ishvaku. Okay, and then in verse number 2, he says, this knowledge handed down thus by regular succession, the royal sages knew. So basically this knowledge was handed down through the royal sages. So, and a long time has passed from the time that this yoga has descended. So then third is, today I have taught you the same ancient yoga, the supreme secret, because you are my devotee and you are my friend. So Krishnji still is talking as a friend and as a teacher to him. Okay. Then verse number 4. Now Arjun says that you were born later than the sun. Because see, Krishnji in verse 1 says, I taught this yoga to the sun. Now he's not talking as Krishnji, he's talking about as the supreme, the creator, the unborn, the one, the source from all that came. So now Arjun is confused. He's saying, but Krishna, you were born much later than the sun and all these people that you've mentioned. So I don't understand your statement. How could you have taught the yoga in the beginning of creation? So, when people give a date to the Vedas, I'm very unsettled. A lot of times you'll see in these books and all, they'll say the Vedas are more than 5,000 years old, etc. And you cannot really give a date to Vedas. Before that, it was a verbal tradition. But this knowledge has been there from the beginning of time, from the, not even time, but from the beginning of creation, because knowledge is inherent in consciousness. So some of it was capsulized in these Vedas, which were verbal, and a lot of the Vedas and the knowledge we've also lost. We're only left with the tip of the iceberg, and then they were written. So it's, when you look at it from a book, or how old the carbon dating is and all that, no one can really give a date to the Vedas. Yeah, you might find a very old manuscript, but it doesn't date the Vedas. So that is why, Krishnji is saying here that this yoga, this knowledge has existed from the beginning, from when creation happened. But anyway, Arjun says, how could have you have given this knowledge from the beginning? And now you'll see the shift in Krishnji. Now Krishnji is not going to talk as Krishna, he's going to talk as the Supreme. So now here, now you think of this as your soul, as your Atma saying this to your ego. Because here, Arjun and Krishna and all these characters of the Mahabharata, make them symbolic. Okay? So treat Krishnji's words as the words coming from your consciousness, from your Atma, and treat Arjun as your ego, as your mind and intellect. And observe this as a conversation between your consciousness and your limited mind and intellect. Okay? So now, supposing you ask this to your consciousness and your consciousness responds saying, many births of mine have passed as well as yours, O Arjun. I know them all, but you know them not. So basically he's saying that I remember all my past births, because it's not just me as Krishna, but me as the immortal being that has taken so many births. I remember them, but Arjun does not. Because as you know, in Sanatana Dharma, we do believe in reincarnation. So now verse number 6, he says, though I am unborn of imperishable nature, the Lord of all beings, yet ruling over my own nature, I take birth by my own Maya. So he's saying that he is unborn, he is of unperishable nature. He meaning your soul, your consciousness is unborn, it's imperishable. It is the Lord of all beings, because that consciousness is not limited. It doesn't have a boundary around it. That consciousness of yours is the same consciousness as mine, as the same consciousness which is universal. Because when you get to consciousness, you transcend duality. There is only one. And that same consciousness pervades all beings. It's omnipresent, omniscient. So, ruling over my nature, because that consciousness rules over nature, because nature comes about from consciousness, and also the Maya of creation has also been born from that consciousness. So, using that power of Maya, which has also come from consciousness, I create this nature and I create my births. So it's very profound, you see. It's all like a game. It's like, consciousness is like this canvas. And on a canvas, it paints many things. And many things come about. But it is the substratum upon which all this is drawn. So just like you can think of canvas as consciousness and the painting on it as nature, as creation, and many things happening in this creation, that is happening on top of it, but it is one. So consciousness and creation are superimposed, so to say, on top of each other. So he's saying that I am of imperishable nature, I am the unborn. It's a very powerful statement. And then 7, he says, O Arjun, wherever there is a decay. Now this is a very famous yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamiham. So this is a very famous verse. These verses are very famous. He says, whenever there's a decay of righteousness and the rise of unrighteousness, then I manifest myself. This myself is important because whenever there is a decay of righteousness and a rise of unrighteousness, then I manifest myself. Now, myself is the rise of consciousness. The myself again here, you shouldn't think of Krishnji, just not one person, but myself meaning consciousness or dharma. You see, the here dharma is related to righteousness. Okay, so the rise of dharma will happen. So this is also within yourself also, and also in the world or in the entire creation. It is a natural cycle. There will be a rise of dharma, there will be a decay of dharma, and the cycle will continue. And in this cycle, whenever the balance, there's imbalance where the unrighteousness imbalances the righteousness, there naturally what will happen is there will be a rise of dharma again to bring back the balance. So even in you this will happen. The conscience, your decay, when decay happens, and that happens, that again from that lower self you shall rise to your higher self, and that shall also happen in the world, because the individuals in the world make up the collective, right? So that's what he's saying here. You must have heard this verse, I'm sure. And when that happens, saying that I am born in every age for the protection of the good and for the destruction of the wicked and for the establishment of righteousness, of dharma. So this is very nice. I love this verse because whenever you feel, whenever you see so much darkness and negativity in the world, it's sort of your savior verse that you can come back to and realize that throughout the ages, avatars and prophets and gurus and of various potentials have come to protect those who are good, those who are righteous, and to destroy that which is wicked within you and also in the world, and to re-establish righteousness. Because see, you must always understand that the amount of negativity is both in you also and in the world also. It is not just inside only or outside only. So whenever you think of consciousness, your inner consciousness, your inner guru, or your outer guide will help you to raise that righteousness within you. And in the world also, there will be people who are righteous, who are dharmic, who are gurus, who are prophets, who are avatars, will help bring about transformation. And we've seen so many of them come. Even in our history books you can see there's so many who've come and contributed to bring back the balance, correct? So these are also very famous verse. And then he says, now when Arjuna has asked him, how can it be you that has taught this? Now see, he's got his answer, because now Krishnji is not talking like that. He's saying that I come in every age to restore righteousness. And my birth and karma divine, thus he knows me, in essence is not born again. Now see this verse. Now supposing you read it as your consciousness saying this. this consciousness here is saying that my birth and karma are divine. Thus, he who knows me, he meaning that intellect, that ego that comes to know me meaning that consciousness within you, in its essence, will not be born again when he leaves the body. He who comes to me, O Arjun. So think of it as not just like you are going to Krishnji, you know. So that would be very limited understanding. Here, the deeper understanding is whenever you realize your true essence, whenever you realize your true nature, then you will never be born again. And that you will merge back into your consciousness. That is what is the deeper meaning of that verse. Then, verse number 10. Many being freed from attachment, fear. See, now here again, if you remember, these three came up in a previous chapter, and I told you that these are the three, when we were talking about impurities, and there's so many impurities, various things of rag, dvesh, of greed, of jealousy, of aversion, of attachment, and so forth. Three are the main ones. These are the three main impurities, which is mentioned again here, which is rag. Rag is mentioned here as attachment. Dvesh is anger, and the third is bhay, which is fear. So these are the main three impurities. So when you're being freed from these impurities and you're absorbed in your consciousness, you take refuge in that consciousness. So you're freed from your impurities. Naturally, when a mirror is cleaned of the dust, then you can see your reflection, right? Thus being purified by the fire of knowledge, they have attained my being. So here you see the fire of knowledge. Now he's transitioning to knowledge. So how does that purification happen? The purification happens when you offer these impurities into the fire of knowledge. And knowledge is the only thing that can purify you. This is a big statement here. So why is he saying it here now? Because what he's saying is that you can do all the actions you want, and you can do all the devotion you want, and you can do all the spiritual practices you want, but it's only by the knowledge of yourself, the Atma Gyan, the Atma Darshan, only by that can you finally remove your karma and your vasanas and your impurities. That is what this verse means, is that finally it is your own realization of the nature of your soul. When you experience that, that fire of knowledge, of true wisdom, of true knowing is what will finally put an end or erase all the impurities, all your karma, all your vasanas. Up till then, it's all stepping up, it's all building up to that. Karma yoga is building up to that, the spiritual practices, the devotion, all these other yogas are finally building up to the final annihilation, which can only be done by the fire of knowledge, which is true gyan, true wisdom. Okay? So that's what that verse means. The method of... so I have marked something here. So the method of controlling the mind by the body is called Karma Yoga. Okay, so that's the first step, right? So how do you control the mind? How do you control the mind in the first step? Through Karma Yoga is through bodily actions. Then this person who is extremely external in their understanding, they're all about the body and outer world. For them, this is the first step, which is good, where you start with outer actions. And by this correct action or right action, a lot of the mind, say 25% of the work is done, 25% of the mind is controlled. When that happens, now you can progress to Bhakti Yoga, whereby the mind is further purified and further integrated. Now, when that happens, it is now conducive for the Bhakti Yoga in particular is conducive to those people who have an emotional temperament. And the method of controlling the mind from the intellect is called Jnana Yoga. So you have the body covered, you have the emotions covered, and you have the intellect covered, right? So Karma Yoga you start because most people are more body, they have more identity with the body. Most people are more external facing. So you start with Karma Yoga. Then you come to the mind and emotions and you purify that through the Bhakti Yoga. And finally, you purify the intellect through Jnana Yoga. Okay, so verse number 10. Many being freed from attachment, fear, and have absorbed, have taken rest. Okay, that we did. Let's see. Okay, verse number 11 is, as men approach me, so do I reward them, O Arjun. All men through all means walk my path alone. Okay, so here he's saying this in the last one. He says, as men approach me, so do I reward them, O Arjun. All men through all means walk my path alone. So it doesn't matter, each one has their own unique path. And this is the beauty of Sanatan Dharma compared to a lot of other traditions, is that Sanatan Dharma gives you the liberty to pursue your own spiritual path depending on your own nature. Because you will see each and everybody's spiritual path is so unique. No two people will have exactly the same spiritual journey. So he's saying that no matter which path you follow, ultimately it is my path alone. It is not. It is not different from me. So he's saying that, know that you're always on the path. You can never go off the path, is sort of what he's saying. Because when you are a sincere seeker and you are pursuing something, you've learned the scriptures, you've heard from a guru, you've done everything you can to practice it, whether it's through Karma Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, or Jnana Yoga, or through Raj Yoga. Know that you are on the right path, and know and have confidence that your spiritual path is authentic, it's accepted, it's God's path. So that is what he's saying here. So there's not one prescribed path for everybody, that there is only this path and this path alone, and if you don't follow it you'll be judged. It's not like that. So that's why this verse is very important. And then 12 is, those who long for satisfaction from actions in this world worship the gods because reward is quickly attained from actions in the world of humans. So basically here it mentions the word deva. Okay, the deva here, it means the sense organs. Okay, so the sense organs are controlled by certain energies, you can think of it. There's a certain energy behind your sense organs. Those energies or elemental forces are called devas. Okay, so that's what so those who pursue this, the path of attaining worldly gains through their sense organs will obviously attain a certain amount of worldly gain, worldly joy. But after that, when you realize that that is limited, then when you pursue the permanent, you'll see people sort of move their energy from pursuit of the limited gains towards the eternal gains. So that's what he's saying here, is like you basically, you can enjoy your fleeting joys and temporary objects, but finally you want the higher way, live the higher way of life. Okay, so now verse number 13 is a very famous verse, and I really like this verse. So and this is a topic of great discussion also. So verse number 13 he's saying is the Chatur Varnam. So this Varna system, okay, which is wrongly called the caste system by the British, but it's actually the Varna system, the fourfold caste or the Varna, has been created by me according to the differentiation of guna and karma. Okay, so like I was talking to you in one of the past sessions, is that there are fundamentally four gunas and four categories of gunas, and depending on that, on your nature, on your guna, you are certain karma is recommended to you, certain professions or livelihoods are recommended for you. So in creation, or maybe you can think of as earth, on planet earth, just like you have blue collar workers and white collar workers, and you have certain, I went over this so many times, the scholars, the leaders, the traders, and the workers. So he's saying here the fourfold caste has been created by me according to the differentiations of guna and karma which naturally exist. This is not something that the Vedas or God has prescribed, or Krishnji or the Vedas have said, okay, here are the four. See, the Vedas are never dictating anything. Vedas is simply knowledge of what is. That's all there is. Like science, you can relate Vedas and this Vedic knowledge very much to science. It is simply explaining what is. It is not dictating that there should be these four classes. No, it is not like that. It's highly misunderstood. All it is saying is the recognition of what exists, the explanation of what exists, and it's phenomenal the amount of understanding with such detail and such refinement of knowledge of nature and of humans and of consciousness. It's a reflection of a very refined society, of a very evolved consciousness. See, when you can see as scientists evolve, our understanding of creation is also evolving. But you see, when you look at the Vedas and you read the Vedas and you read Ayurveda and you read all these Upaveds, it's mind-boggling. How did these people know this so well in such a complete sense? So not only is the depth there, but the completeness is there. So the depth and the breadth of this knowledge is so phenomenal. It's so complete. It's mind-boggling, because I've been learning from many decades, and I still cannot fathom how can they have known all of this. So there are three areas of knowledge. Knowledge of creation, or all of nature, not just of earth, but all of creation, meaning all the dimensions, not just the physical dimension, but all dimensions that exist. That's knowledge of creation. Then knowledge of the jeev, the human individual soul. Okay, that's two. And number three is knowledge of consciousness, of Brahman, of Atma, of soul, or whatever you call it. So these three categories are the three categories of knowledge. And the amount of knowledge of these three categories is phenomenal. So simply, these rishis, who had access to all knowledge because they were enlightened, simply said that there are four types of nature, four main categories of nature that exist, and they're simply explaining it, they're not dictating it. So according to the guna and the karma, okay. And so he's saying that though I am the author thereof, meaning consciousness. Consciousness is the one that created the gunas, the rajogun, the tamogun, and the sattvagun. Because all of creation is nothing but a combination, permutation of these three gunas. Prakriti means these three gunas, okay? Saying even though I am an author of these gunas of creation, that I am not the doer. I am not the doer, meaning it is happening, but it's not happening from consciousness directly. So the best way to sort of say this is see, when you dream, okay, so the person who is sleeping is not doing anything, though the dream is happening. So it's like that, it's like you're watching a movie, there's a projection screen and the movie is projected on it. The projection screen is not doing anything, or the person who's sleeping is not doing anything, but the dream happens, correct? So like that, you can think of it as consciousness is like space, and within space how all objects move, all things happen, but space remains not the doer. It's everything happens in space, but space is not the doer. It is simply within which everything happens, correct? So that's why he's saying that, I am know me as the non-doer and as the imperishable. So I hope that is clear to you. So that this is a very important verse number 13, and I hope you understand it well. I've actually written a blog on this also, because then this thing about Chaturvarnyam is also again talked about in detail in chapter 18, where he explains the four varnas in detail, what their nature is and what they what they usually do. So that is covered much later. So verse number 14, that actions do not taint me, nor do I have any desires for the fruit of actions. He who knows me thus is not bound by action. So again here when he says he who knows me thus, meaning if you know your consciousness well, you will not be bound by your actions. You will know that your consciousness is not the doer and you are that consciousness. Here is how the renunciation of action happens in knowledge. So it's saying that when you know that you are consciousness, you will know that you, meaning you, the Atma, is not the doer. So anything that happens is happening outside. It cannot taint the soul. Anything that's happening, whether it's a disease or an action, whether good or bad, it has no implication on the soul. It is only related to that individuality. It accumulates in that individuality and it perishes in that individuality. The soul is simply untouched by all of this. So it has no desire, nor does it get fruits of action. It's not the bhokta, it's not the karta. That's what it means here. Okay? Uh,
You get the karma and the doership together. Like, how do we reconcile that?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so the doership, we are saying the soul is. So I'm not the body, I'm the soul.
You are all of it.
Not.
Correct. So you can think of it as basically that if you once you know that you are the soul, you are the Atma that is functioning through the mind, intellect and body, then you will know that everything is happening through that instrument which you call the mind body instrument, but the soul is simply the witness of it. It is not the doer. So what happens is that your individual personality is the one that is doing, correct? It's not the soul. The soul cannot perform any action. The soul doesn't have any desire. Desire comes from ego. And so if it comes from ego, then the result of that action will also go to the ego or that individuality. So it's your personal account, the account of the ego. The soul has no account of karma. It has nothing to do with karma. So it is this individuality that is created. When this individuality is created, it's sort of like a parallel. It's a parallel to the consciousness. So you can think of the consciousness as the substratum, as space. And then you can think of this individuality as an object within that space which has desires, which has a personality and so forth. But the space has no personality, it doesn't do anything, it's inert, it's not a doer. Does it make sense?
we say like
Raju.
we have an account for karma.
Uh-huh.
So, and then we take a rebirth, for example, the next life, and the reason we are born in Bill Gates' family versus a janitor's family, for example, that is because of the karma we did. So that karma carries, right? That karma carries not with the soul, but with the, like, with what? Like, who
With the
carries the
jeev.
karma?
Yeah. So so you have the atma and what is called the jeev, the individuality, the personality is called the jeev. Okay, the jeev is the individuality that is created from ignorance. When you forget that you are the atma, this individuality is created from ignorance, where you identify yourself with the limited intellect, mind, and body. So, so it has three layers. This Jiv, J-I-V. Okay. So you have Atma, which is untouched, which is not the doer, which is the eternal. It's the infinite and so forth. Then you have the Jiv. Okay, the individual, the personality, which has three layers, which has the causal layer. And next time maybe we can cover the tattva both. So there's three layers. One is the causal layer. That keeps your account, your karmic account, your vasanas. These two main things are there, which is called causal because that's the cause of your life, your birth and death and everything that happens in your life, which is karmic. The causal. Then you have the subtle. The subtle is the intellect, the mind, the breath, the senses, and so forth. Is your subtle body, and then you have the gross body, which has the physical senses, the body, and so forth. So these three layers is called the limited self, the personality. That goes birth and death and birth and death, and that is what has the karma. The atma is like a so you can think of this as the wave of the ocean, or you can think of it as something that exists within space. But Atma itself is a transcendental. It doesn't have any form. It doesn't have any name. It doesn't have any shape. It has nothing. It is pure consciousness. It's bliss.
That's where I'm confused. Every time you mention word consciousness, I was also connecting it with the Atma.
It is
But then
Atma. Consciousness is Atma.
today you mentioned some of the similarity, like the consciousness is like a space, the whole space.
Hmm.
And so then I got a little bit like a what then very soul in it, because all the actions and stuff are happening in the space you mentioned, doesn't affect consciousness.
Correct. So
So
Western terms are dependent on context and people. So let me step away from the Western or English terms, okay? Because consciousness and soul can be used by different people to mean different things. So let's keep it to the Vedic terms, okay? So Atma is the one that is transcendental. Now, the only way I can describe the transcendental to you is to relate it to space, because space doesn't have any form, it doesn't do anything. So that's why I relate it to space. Some people relate it to, say, the ocean, and the individual personality, which is called the Jeev, that you can think of as an object within the space. Okay, like a being, or basically something which has got these three levels: the causal, the subtle, and the physical. Okay, or you
those
can think of it as a wave that rises from that ocean. So the individual is the one which has name and form, and that individual, that jeev, that individual, is the one that takes birth again and again in different bodies. So it's like one wave rises and it subsides, then it rises and it subsides. So you cannot, it's not that it's completely separate. So you have the ocean and the wave. So a wave rises from the ocean and then it goes down. So that's like you take a birth, it takes shape, you can call it by a name, and when it dies, it subsides back into the ocean. Then it comes up again, it has a name and a form, and then it subsides back into the ocean.
okay. So that's a difference between Atma and Jiv.
Yes, it's a very important difference.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so let's keep to Atma and Jeev, okay? So most of the time I'll say, if I do say English term, when I say consciousness, I mean it is the Atma. Okay, and Atma is not it doesn't have any boundaries. It's beyond duality. So your Atma is not different from my Atma. Atma is beyond duality. It's all one. You understand that, right?
Yes, I do. I'm writing.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
Atma is not individual. Atma is Atma. You see. Um, so the ocean is the same for all of us. It's not your ocean and my ocean. Atma is the same. It is eternal. It is infinite. It's omniscient. It's omnipresent. It is all of that. So in Sanatan Dharma, this consciousness, whether you call it Atma or Brahman, it's the same thing. Atman and Brahman is the same thing. There's no difference. It's just the context of when you speak of it. You see, when you speak, you're speaking to an individual, you'll say, your Atma. But when you're speaking of the collective, you'll say Brahman. But it's the same thing, whether the ocean water is within a pot or whether it's outside the pot, it is still ocean water. Okay? So consciousness is same, Atman is same as Brahman. Okay, we're running out of time. Let me see, there's still a lot of chapter 4 left. This is very important. I can't skip it. I'll have to cover it next time. I'm sorry. Let me see where we were. So let me see if it's chapter 4, verse number 15. Yeah.
We just completed 13.
Yeah, 13. And what is 14? Actions do not taint me, I have no desire. So 14 was basically actions do not taint me, I have. So when he's saying that, you can think of it as your own Atma saying this, which is 14. And then 15 is thus knowing the ancient seekers of freedom also pursued action, therefore you too can perform action. That's not a very important verse. 16 is what is action, what is inaction. As to this, the wise were deluded. Even the wise were deluded. Therefore, I shall teach you. So
What is
16.
action and what is inaction?
Therefore, I shall
Because
teach you action, the nature
next
of.
3 slokas are about it only, karma and akarma.
Yeah. Knowing which you should be liberated from evil. So that's verse number 16. He's just posing it as a question. He's not really talking about it. Now, verse number 17 is what the right action is should be known, and also what is forbidden action and what is inaction. Okay, now verse number 17 is again a very technical or logical approach, because whenever you approach any subject like a scientist, you must define it correctly. So there are 3 types of actions. One is right action, and then there is forbidden action, and there is inaction. So there can't be a third. Okay, so there either this right.
Karma means forbidden.
Sorry.
Vikarma
Yes,
is the
vikarm, correct. So you have karma and vikarm, and so you have activity, you have inactivity, karma and vikarm, right? So that's how he's classifying it, right? So there are 3 types of actions. He might go into it later in detail, but there are just 3 classifications. It's common sense. I mean, it's nothing that that is not apparent. But he's just defining that there are 3 types. There's 3 classifications. Only 3 types that can exist. Then verse number 18 is he who recognizes action and. Okay, now this is a very confusing verse. Verse number 18 is he who recognizes inaction in action and action in action is the wise among the men. He is a yogana, true performer of all actions. So, a yogi, even when he is acting in the world, he knows that he is not the actor. He remains established in inaction. Okay? So that's why he says recognizes the inaction in action. So think of it like this. See, like you have a wheel and an axle. Okay? The axle doesn't move. The center doesn't move. So a yogi is established in that center at the axle of the wheel, and the wheel is turning round and round, but he's established in the center. So you see how action and action is happening? There is inaction at the center and this action all around you. Okay? So that is what he's trying to describe here. And the action and inaction. So the second portion he's saying is the action in inaction. So even though a yogi may be in a meditative state, action is still happening. Okay? So it's not that you're sitting in meditation or you're in samadhi, but when you're in a meditative state, action continues to happen. So this is what I say, to a lot of people. It's very good to meditate, but it's also very good to be in a meditative state throughout the day, because then you are not affected. So you are at your center. So this is what he's saying. It sounds very confusing, but if you think of it as a wheel where you are established at the axle, which is not engaged in action, it is still, it is steady, it is not moving, that center. And yet the wheel is moving around and round and round, right? That's how I could put it simply to you. Otherwise you can go on and on and on and not understand what is this verse saying. So that is what that verse is saying. Do you understand it? Okay, good. And then 9 is he who understands the undertakings of all desired purposes, actions have been burnt by fire. Again, he's talking about this fire of knowledge. Okay, it's the same thing. Basically, where you renounce all of these into the fire of knowledge. I've already covered this fire of knowledge with you. It's the same thing that I spoke about before. 20 is having given up attachment to fruits of action, never depending on. Okay, this also we have also covered. Basically, giving up attachment to the fruit of action again is a central definition of karma yoga. So he's ever content, depending on nothing. Though engaged in action, he doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything, meaning you perform all the actions in the world, but you know that you're actually your true self, your Atma is not doing anything. I'm trying to get to the verse which goes into the yajnas, and then we can end. So he who is without desire, the mind and self-controlled, and has given up all sense of possessions, though performing merely bodily actions, incurs no sin. No sin meaning you don't acquire any karma or vasanas. So the mind is controlled, he has given up all sense of possessions, and though you're performing actions, it's merely bodily actions. Then when you're doing that, you're not performing from your ego, you're performing from your Atma. When you do that, you'll act according to dharma, and when you do that, you don't acquire any consequences. Any sin here means karma and vasanas. Okay, 22 is content with all that comes to him by itself, free from pairs of obstacles, without envy, even-minded in success and failure. Here he's just describing this person in different terms. So he who, you're content with whatever comes to you by itself. You're free from the pairs of opposites, meaning, you don't get affected whether you're healthy or unhealthy, whether you're happy or unhappy, with pleasure and pain and all these pairs of opposites. Without envy of anybody, you're even-minded in success and failure. Like I told you, like whether you're famous or whether you lose that fame or whatever, you're not affected by any of this. Whether somebody criticizes you or praises you or whatever happens, you don't get affected. And though you're acting, you're not bound. Okay, now we can stop here. So now the following 9 verses explain the divine motive and attitude with which men of perfection act in the world. So we'll start with verse number 23 next time. Okay, and if you want, you can read the commentary, but now it'll get into a different section of the fourth chapter, and we can talk about this in the next session. It starts talking about the yagya portion. It's very nice. It's one of the verses here is Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnyo, Brahma Ahutam, Brahma Vade Gamtarvyam, Brahma Karma Samadhinam. It's a very nice verse, and most people say that verse before you eat a meal. So that kind of summarizes it. But the way it's approached, the whole yagya portion where it starts with this Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagnyo, Brahma Ahutam, Brahmaivatena Gamtarvyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. This starts with the highest form of yagya, and then it's sort of like a ladder. And a lot of the same methodology is used elsewhere in Gita, where it always starts with the highest, and it says, well, if you can't do this, then do this. If you can't do this, then you do this. So here the yagya start with the highest form of yagya or an attitude. So we'll do that next time.
Vinita ji, I had
Sumant here.
Yeah.
Before start of the next session, I have a request, and you may give a little more details on akarma and vikarma.
Okay, sure. We can do that. Akarma and vikarma. Okay. There are 3, right? Karma, vikarma, and akarma.
Exactly. That's right. That would be great to
Sure.
together.
We'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, akarma is the main thing for me. Karma means right action, vikarma is forbidden action, but akarma means what? I mean, don't do the stuff, that's why.
Yes, akarma basically means that that you should not be attached to inaction either. It came in the second chapter also, right? So it's when he says that you have the right to action and not the fruit of action, nor should your attachment be to inaction. This is something that a lot of Hindus suffer from, is inaction. We just avoid action. Whether it's from tamas and laziness or something, or whether it's from fear of speaking the truth, and it's very prevalent. So inaction means, it doesn't mean that because it doesn't mean that you don't act. Gita is the Bible for action. So it's saying that it's not like Arjun wants to run away from the battlefield and say, I just want to be a sannyasi, I don't want to do anything. This is not the syllabus here. This is not the subject here. The subject is on right action. It is not on incorrect action, and nor is it on inaction. Because as long as you live from your first breath to your dying breath, you will have action. So inaction or akarm basically means that those 2 other categories, whether it's vikarm or akarm, neither one are the correct path. So how do you do right action is the key. But that's basically what it is. So Krishnji totally rejects inactivity or inaction. He's a man of action. Well, we can cover it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When the veil of ignorance comes off and the jeev realizes that it is the Atma, the karmic account of the jeev still needs to be settled, right?
No. It cannot happen till there's a karmic account. So that happens, the veil starts thinning as the karma starts burning. So here it talks about how the karma can finally be burnt in the fire of knowledge. And when that happens, the karma, as the karma and vasana start reducing, the veil becomes thinner.
Vinita ji, Venkat here. I had a similar question. Can you share some more resources from where I can get to know more about causal body and subtle body?
Yeah, let's do that in the next class. So Seema had sent an email link to Tattva Bodh in one of her emails. Let me see, where is it? It's from the email on February 8th, and she has a link here, which is point number 2 is the Tattva Bodh chart. Okay, so why don't you go to her email and look up that Tattva Bodh chart, learn it, and then we'll discuss it in the next class. The next session actually on chapter 4 doesn't really require you to know this one, but we can cover it because I keep talking about it, but this I should have actually covered way up front so that it's this Atma and Jeev and causal body is very clear to all of you. So let's do that at the beginning of the next session so you understand what are all these layers of existence.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's great. Hope you enjoyed it.